Ready?
And we're live. Great to be back, Pablo.
That's right.
So on this video, it's a special one. It's unique because we got a wonderful letter response from one of our valued viewers, and it was a response to the video that we did on you growing up in Cuba.
Okay.
And we've been getting different feedback, right, from the podcast and from different viewers, but we've never had a letter response, nor have we had an 8-page lettered response.
Eight
Um,
pages.
8 pages of wonderful feedback and their view and their thoughts and on the podcast we did on you growing up in Cuba. How do you feel about getting a response like that?
It it floored me because this gentleman happens. Now he was born here, right?
Yes.
He was born here, but his family is, you know,
Armenian.
Armenia. Okay, so they went through a lot, and the video that we did on me growing up on Cuba really resonated with him.
Yeah.
He identified with a lot of the things. And this guy can write a book and it would be a bestseller. Um, he's a tremendous human being. But, he sent us 8 pages, you know? He really took the time to write things down. And how do I feel about it? Grateful. Grateful that he took the time to put something like this together, to pinpoint different things in the video that we made, create analogies to his own life, which are extremely meaningful. And this is what this country was built on, you know? Yeah, extremely grateful.
Yeah.
There's no other way to explain it.
Yeah, I mean, you were just sharing your experience, and it was interesting to see how it connected with our good friend, and then also with other people we've shared it with, which is so interesting because I've heard you say it before, but the story of an immigrant is many times the same or very similar, even if you're coming from different parts of the world.
Correct.
And so the story of the Armenian genocide and the bless you, bless you,
Excuse me.
and them being forced to leave is similar to many immigrants, and he connected with the Cuban migration, right?
Yeah. All the immigrants that are coming like from Vietnam, China, Latin America, we all have one thing in common, or many things in common. But the one thing is either them or their parents, came to America looking for a better life for their kids and for themselves. Most of the times they're thinking of their kids.
Yeah.
So that's one very important factor, because America was like, a fertile land of opportunity where one could be free and leave the oppressions. So that's one thing that they're looking for, opportunities. But the other thing is, extremely important, they're looking for freedom because they're all struggling where they were potentially, because of governments,
Yeah.
Taking over and being dictatorships, communism, whatever. And, they just want to have freedom.
Yeah.
And this country offers that.
Yeah, I remember our good friend from Vietnam.
Yeah.
He told us
You're
about
talking about John.
Yeah, some of the struggles that he went through. I mean, we can't say all because obviously, everybody who comes to America may have different reasons. Like I remember I went to school with a buddy at PCC, Pasadena City College, and this gentleman, his this young guy, his father was from Japan.
Okay.
And I remember one time he was telling me, "Oh, I'm gonna buy myself a belt." And when he told me the belt that it was a Hermes belt, or I don't know how to pronounce it. It's French, Hermes. It was a $4,000 belt. He's like, "Yeah, my dad's gonna send me some money." Now this is like one situation, right? So it depends. But a lot of people that do come with that, but not everybody.
Well, some of them are privileged, and they come here to study.
Yeah.
Because traditionally we have the best universities.
Right. Like the family that our grandma Victoria was nanny to, right? The children, they were in Cuba, but they were very wealthy, that family, and they were sending their children to New York, I think,
Yeah.
boarding schools and things like that. So it's always happened, right?
Yeah, and it's interesting that you mentioned that, because that particular boarding school in New York, and I wish I could remember the name, you had to inscribe or apply shortly after the child was born.
Wow. That's like
So
very
there was
hard
like,
to get into. Exclusive.
yeah, I mean, and it was, think about that for a second.
The waiting list.
Shortly after your child was born, you needed to send in all the application, all the stuff, all the.
Yeah.
Can you imagine?
Yeah.
So that she could be accepted when she was like, I think, 12 or something like that. It was crazy.
But going back to the story of you growing up in Cuba, and then, not wanting to, grandma didn't want to leave, right? She had bought land, which she worked very hard to save up. They built a house. Your grandma and grandpa, your parents built a house on that land. They didn't want to leave that land. They felt by force that they had to.
Right.
And that story is what our good friend connected with. And, he shared a really, really interesting response. But one of the things that I thought that just hit me the most, I think, it was all very, very nice, the response. But one of the things that hit me...
I've read that letter 3 or 4 times. It's it humbles me.
Oh.
I mean...
But one of the things that I really connected with was at the ending of our podcast, where I wanted to bring some sort of happy notes to the podcast, because it's about struggles and leaving and not wanting to and all that. And so I started asking you, were there good times in Cuba? Like as a child, growing up, were there any good times? And then you said, sure, yeah, there were. And then you brought up the story, or I brought up the story about you playing, throwing rocks, chicken, at that one kid, Carlitos.
Yeah.
And you hit him in the head and he started bleeding and everything, right? And so our good friend, very valued viewer, said, it was, I couldn't help but compare Pablo as a kid throwing rocks to the story of David and Goliath.
Oh my goodness!
Right, and he was saying that you were David fighting against the giant, which was the regime and Fidel Castro's government that didn't want you to leave and made it difficult on families, and that was Goliath. They were the more powerful one.
Oh,
but were they? Because in from his point of view, he's David and Goliath. David wins.
Right.
So that was a really, really cool. I had never even thought about that. I heard that story my whole life growing up.
Well, it's just it. I mean, it humbles me. Extremely grateful, and the whole family has read the letter. And I gave it to your brother in another. It impacted him tremendously too. A different part where, in the podcast on growing up in Cuba, there's one point where you asked me a question about testing and stuff like that, and I tell you that my mom would train me not to get 100% on the math,
Yes.
okay? Because there was a fear that if you were really good in math, potentially they would send you to Russia to become a fighter pilot. But they'll send you, and then they'll take you away from the family. So he says in the letter that's kind of like telling a thoroughbred horse,
Racehorse.
a racehorse, not to win the race.
Right.
And that got to your brother. And
Yeah.
he says, oh my goodness, because he took his time. And that's what I appreciate the most. I mean, this guy took his time to write this down, and it impacted him. And,
Yeah.
we're older now. We want to think we're wiser. And if we can share something like this with our viewers so that they can see how every single one of us has something that impacts another human being. Every single one of us with potentially a word, a sentence that we say can, give guidance or stimulate someone to do something good.
Yeah.
It's, and that's what it's all about,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Actually, that comment about, or the feedback on you having to score lower on tests, I did share the podcast with several of my friends also, and one of my good friends, Aaron, told me the same thing. He said, I found that so interesting, that your grandma had to, he says, I wish I would have met your grandma.
Oh,
But
Jesus.
Yeah. It's but she lives on through us, right?
Yeah,
and,
yeah.
And same with our good friend, his father and his mother, they live on through, his family lives on through him, and that's the thing is, but a lot of people, that specific thing connected to them,
Yeah.
that they couldn't fathom the idea that a parent is telling you to test lower than what your capabilities are.
Right. Yeah, you share that. And like I say in the podcast, I was one of the lucky ones. Okay? Those were part of my struggles, and there's a lot more, but there were a lot of people who suffered tremendously
Yeah.
and have been scarred heavily.
Yeah.
Okay? Fortunately, I wasn't one of those. I was able to. I want to think I've had a normal life.
You want to
It's up
think
for
you
the
came
yeah. I
out,
want.
you came out normal?
If you ask your mother, she might have a different opinion, or some of the people that know me, But
There's no doubt that it affects you for the rest of your life.
Oh,
I
yeah.
mean, there's no doubt.
For
Our
sure.
experiences, especially at a young age, right? They say, I think I've heard this before, that between the age of 0 to 7, that's what they say, 0 to 6, 0 to 7, those are like your development years.
Yeah, Jordan Peterson says you have a child for 5 years.
5 years.
After that, their core and everything about them it's actually set in place, and then that development is crucial.
Yeah.
In the first 5 years.
Yeah.
That's what he says. He's supposed to be one of the most important minds of our
It makes
current
sense.
times.
It makes sense. They're computers, and they're just absorbing everything, everything. Especially when they can't speak. It's all the physical. I'm sorry, all the nonverbal cues and all that.
Oh, yeah.
That they're picking up because they maybe don't understand. So yeah, I mean, a lot of people connected with it. It was really nice, and
I'm surprised. Really, I'm humbled by it. This is a good time to thank everybody that has been so extremely supportive. And for the most part, we're getting really, really very nice and beautiful comments. We did get a couple, remember, that were, this is very unprofessional. And so we're getting better, guys.
Oh,
okay?
yeah.
We're getting better. And remember that one?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, you get anybody off the street, and that was interesting. But
Yeah.
they didn't stick around long enough on the podcast.
Right.
They
But
clicked off right away.
Yeah, this is it's a fun project that we're doing, but you know, it is. I think that through your story, people can relate, and through your story, people can get an understanding of how it was in Cuba at the time, you know, and what some of the people had to go through to leave through the story. Because you can watch something or a movie. That's why movies are so
Powerful, huh?
powerful. And our good friend, you know, he's who sent us the 8 page response. He has that background, right, in theater. And so movies are extremely powerful. You know, it conveys so much emotion, but the story. And one day we'll make a movie on you.
No, that's
We'll write a book on you.
you know, we went to see a presentation by Bedros, and he shared many things that happened to him in his life, and they were extremely impactful.
Yeah.
Something like that will change someone forever in whatever direction. And so he's been able to put it together and have a good life and doing well. You know, the economic factor in it is not as important as getting it together up here mentally, being able to come full circle with some of the things that happened to you in childhood, which some of them are, for some folks, tremendous.
Yeah.
And, you know, you need maybe outside help. Maybe you need, you know, like he was going to a clinical,
It was a talk therapy, talk therapy.
Yeah.
But I'm not sure.
something like that.
Yeah,
you know.
psychologist maybe.
Yeah. And so, you know, it goes to show you that there are a lot of people going through life with tremendous challenges.
Right.
That's why when someone reacts maybe a little bit erratic, and the first thing we do is take it personal,
Yeah.
it's the wrong approach, because you don't know what that person has gone through, what that person is struggling with.
Right.
You know, like, I'll share this with you. When I first found out that Robert Williams had taken his own life,
Robin Williams.
Robin Williams, yeah. I couldn't believe it.
Yeah.
I couldn't believe it. In fact, I said to the person that told me, no, that's incorrect.
Yeah.
That has to be wrong. Because this guy is making the whole world laugh and smile. It's incorrect. And what a loss.
Yeah.
And something like that. The other guy that impacted me, and I don't remember his name right now, but he was that cook. Remember that he was an international cook, very thin.
Oh yeah.
Very thin gentleman.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And he was all over
Parts Unknown was the name of his show.
Okay.
Um,
I don't remember his name right now, but he was
French. It was a French name.
extremely famous. Yeah. I believe he also...
Anthony Bourdain.
Can you imagine?
Anthony Bourdain, yeah.
I couldn't believe that one either.
Yeah, very sad.
So, you know, it goes to show you how ignorant I am.
Yeah.
Of course, I didn't know these people personally,
Yeah.
but I'm judging them from what I see. How ignorant can I possibly be to think that these people were not going through challenges and struggles? Because evidently they were, because it was enough powerful to take their own lives.
Right.
How desperate do you must be?
Yeah, no, you got to find, I mean, easier said than done, but some sort of help. And someone who listens.
I know we're doing this for fun, but we got this letter. It impacted this man. And this is times when things get serious. And the message out there is, please don't lose hope, because hope should be the last thing. Don't lose hope.
Yeah.
You can't lose hope.
Right.
And there's always somebody that's going to be willing to, listen.
Yeah, that's one thing you say often, because like a lot of people, especially, we like hanging around with people that are older than us. Like I hang around with people that are 2.5, 3 times my age, right? And but I've always liked that, and I've enjoyed getting a little piece of their wisdom because they've seen it. They're not just guessing what's gonna transpire. Like they've actually seen what has transpired. But the other side to it is that one can become cynical. One could become negative. One could, right? And so one thing that you always say is, hey, we can't lose hope,
No.
because no matter how, let's say, bad things have gotten from where maybe they were at a certain point, we can't lose hope. There's always the ability to come back up, and everything is a cycle. Everything is a cycle.
Yeah. I saw it. You're right. I saw Jordan Peterson was doing a talk at some university. And just when they were getting started, or a few minutes into the conversation, there was a panel. A gentleman, my perception is that he screamed out and he tried to come up to the panel saying, I need help, I need help.
Oh, wow.
This was not staged in any way or form. This guy's, I'm really going through I really need help. I need help. Please help me, help me. And at first, when you're doing this in public, since there are people out there sometimes that hurt other people.
Yeah.
So, you've got security guards and stuff like that. But to his credit, Jordan Peterson seemed to be very empathetic. And he said, I hear you. Seek out help.
Right.
Seek, there's people that can help you. Don't give up. You need help. Okay, well, that's the first step. You realize that you need help. But he did it in public,
In front of everybody.
In front of everybody, and the security, took him down or whatever. But that I never forgot.
Yeah.
Because thank God that he did that, and I hope to God that he did get help.
Yeah.
Because there were a lot of people there that seemed to be genuinely concerned for his safety and the safety of others. But, and so, don't lose hope. There's always,
yeah. And I think the story of the podcast that we did, and how Grandma didn't lose hope, even though, let's say, the window was closing for her to take her son out of Cuba and all of that, she kept hope, and had to start all over.
Well, she was very resilient, very strong. And I've heard this, she never lost hope. I'll tell you that the stress was tremendous. Because even as a kid, I could feel that they were under a lot of stress.
Yeah.
I was a kid. So, trying to put things together. So it wasn't all that, later on in life, like I say, I put things together. But I've heard this saying from many, it's out there a lot, and quite a few famous people say it. And they say, if you're going through hell, don't stop. Keep going. Because you're going to walk through it. If you're walking through a storm, okay, if there's a storm in your life right now, don't stop walking. Keep walking. At some point, you're going to walk out of the storm at the other end. And that kind of, I feel that's what my mother did. Because everybody was totally against it. And then by seeing her resolved and her resilience and dedication to this, to get out, she brought everybody along to her way of thinking.
Yeah.
But it had to be brutal.
Well, share with us how the stress affected your dad and his hair.
Oh, so when my dad left Cuba, I was 8 years old, so I remember he had a full set of hair, and it was brown, like dark brown. A year and a half later, when we met, because he went through Spain, and then he came to the U.S., and then we ended up leaving to Spain. So I didn't see my dad for a year and a half, maybe a little bit longer than a year and a half. But by the time I saw him again, his hair had turned completely white, just like this. Completely white. Now, some people say it's genetic because look at me, okay? But man, I remember him leaving and his hair was dark, and then a year and a half later when I saw him.
And I remember the story, the way you guys found out was that when you went to Spain, you and Grandma went to a place where he had made friends, or
Yeah, he visited a lot.
He had visited a lot in Madrid.
In Madrid.
And you went to go visit, and a guy says what to your mom?
She goes, "Oh yeah, the kid is just like his father, looks just like the father." There's an expression in Spain. They say, it's kind of like a cagadito al padre, you know. And so, except for the white hair, and my mom goes, "What white hair?" And he goes, "Yeah, the white gray
Your
hair."
husband has white hair.
Yeah, he's almost fully gray. And my mom goes, no, that's not my husband. So she was shocked as well.
Wow. But
And that's what
the
it did.
stress did. Yeah.
Oh yeah. And you know what? Now that you say that, there's a picture of me, because I'm saying I'm a kid, I didn't feel the stress and stuff like that, but you do, because there's a picture of me that I had to take just before leaving Cuba because there was a special document, a visa or something that you had to send to Spain, and you had to keep pictures, and they had to double check that it was you that was leaving the country, and all this other kind of stuff that was going on. Anyway, there's a picture of me that I took just before leaving Cuba. And then there's a picture of me after I had been in Spain for 6 months. I tell you that as an adult, when I go back and look at that, it's tremendous. You think it doesn't affect you as a kid, but it does. You know, the kids are, like you say, sponges. They absorb everything. And the difference is day and night, man. It's
What did you see in the difference between the two?
Oh, my cheeks were fuller. My eyes in Cuba were droopy. They looked sad. The picture even has like maybe it's the camera, the darker tone to it. I mean, it's just, and then in Spain, after 6 months in Spain, my cheeks were fuller. They were a little red. I have a different haircut, different clothing. I'm smiling, and my eyes are like, happy. I had sad eyes in Cuba,
Wow.
So
Yeah, I've seen that picture.
yeah, and so stress will take you down if you're not careful. You have to figure out a way to hack it. Just figure out a way.
Whether it's exercise or whatever.
That's a good point.
Well, hopefully you find a good way to relieve stress.
Well, there's one guy out there that was extremely stressed out, and he found his way out through exercise.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of people out there that promote exercise for dealing with stress and depression, actually.
Yeah.
We're not no experts here, and this is for fun. We're not giving advice. We're not trying to imply in the least that we know what we're talking about. We don't know what we're talking about.
It's like your buddy, every time we leave him after talking with him, he says all of this that I just told you.
Oh, yeah.
It's a bunch of
art.
BS.
Yeah, everything I just said is a bunch of baloney, okay?
It's a bunch of baloney.
I mean, he's dropping
Don't
pearls.
believe anything I just said.
He's dropping pearls left and right.
Yeah.
And then, and he says it all the time.
Oh, no, it's his finisher. Every time.
By the way, everything that I just said is a lot of baloney.
And then this letter, I wrote back to this valued viewer friend because I wanted him to, because I mean, and the opening word to it is grateful, because I felt so, it impacted me a lot that someone took the time to read and assess and analyze our history, and everybody has a history. Some people are a little more private. Some people, Grandma was a storyteller. So you're a storyteller, you know. Was Grandpa a storyteller?
Not so
Not
much.
so much. Not so
Not
much.
so much.
But she told us his story, you know.
You
So
you
like,
had to drag stuff out of Grandpa,
yeah.
more or less.
So, but I feel grateful and I feel blessed that they, my grandma and my grandpa, your parents, and Tia, her sister, were there to raise us. You know, we grew up with them, and that's why I think also the Cuban influence is very heavy on all of us, my siblings, because I think that because one of my buddies asked, he's Mexican descent, and he said, "Hey, aren't you half Mexican? What about your Mexican side?" And I said, "I am. I'm half Mexican." Um, but I grew up a house away from the Cuban grandparents, so you get a lot more. And then in Spanish, there's a saying "Lo malo se pega,"
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
which is the bad stuff sticks. No, but that's a joke.
Yeah, I
But
know.
but I had a lot more influence on that
Yeah,
side.
you know, what happened there is that uh, your grandma and grandpa on your mother's side, they were the salt of the earth, and they moved out of state
Yeah,
when you guys, because
we
they
were
were
young,
there when you guys were younger. We have a lot of pictures with there, you know. But then
babies.
yeah, but then they moved out of state,
Yeah,
and although we made it a tradition to see them, unfortunately, um,
distance.
the distance doesn't help,
Right,
and also they left us early.
right.
You know, the
Passed
health,
away early. Yeah,
unfortunately.
yeah.
Um, but we still have a lot of stories
Oh yeah,
from. You can tell your buddy, hey, the Mexican influence is good
yeah.
and strong too.
Absolutely. No, I'm very proud
Yeah,
of that side also.
yeah. But they left the state. They left the state
That
when
made it difficult.
it made it difficult, and I
Yeah,
didn't want him to go.
because like oh, of course.
I didn't want him to go. I
But
mean, I got along with my father, and they were just exceptional people,
yeah,
fantastic people,
yeah.
and they molded you guys because they were here well after you. They left like when you were.
I think we were very young too.
Yeah, you were
3.
very
I
young.
must have been
I'm trying to
3,
figure out if
4.
you were 5 years old or not because that's, you know,
Yeah,
there's
yeah.
pictures. Do you remember? You
Well,
remember, of
yeah,
course, your grandpa,
yeah.
but your grandma,
Also, but a lot less. And she passed when I was 6, I believe.
okay. See,
I
that's
think
why
I was
Vicky
6 years
can.
old. So,
Yeah.
but I don't know what year they moved. But
Well, before you were 6.
yeah, but
Because
I think a lot of culture and tradition. That's one thing that I relate a lot with our valued viewer and friend, is that he really cares about his history and lineage.
absolutely.
He really cares. Like I was listening to an interview the other day, and this guy says, "Oh, I'm Russian." Oh, his name is David Portnoy. He's got a media company called Barstool Sports, very very famous. And David Portnoy, and he's Jewish. He's Jewish, and he says, "Oh, I'm Jewish, but I'm actually Russian. My family's Russian, but I don't even know how we're Russian. I don't know how that went down or whatever." He doesn't know any of his. I mean, at least in the interview, he didn't share it of
Oh,
his
okay.
history. So I thought, wow, so much of what makes us is our history. Sometimes we don't have the ability, or for some reason the history isn't passed down, but there's many different reasons why that can happen. But one thing that is very strong in our family is the history of where we came from, and the pride to be of descent, Cuban descent. And then
I think that's in every family.
yeah,
I pretty
you know
much think that's in every family. You're proud of where you came from, and then we come to America as a melting pot, and
yeah,
we're all in this together. That's why there was a guy that he's out of Florida, and he is in public office. He's a gentleman, um, uh, and he said, "Look, when I took the oath to become a U.S. citizen, we're all Americans." From that moment on, I'm an American,
Right.
you know? And that's how we have to view this so that we can unite our country and continue to
Correct.
move forward.
Yeah.
But I think everybody is extremely proud of where they come from.
I don't know.
I
I don't
don't
know
either.
that everybody is,
Okay.
but I know that certain people are.
Yeah.
Certain people are very proud, and yeah, I mean, I'm not sure. You know, I would. There are some people that no. I think there are some people that they want to start fresh here, and they kind of
Oh, okay.
want to let go of their past. You know,
Yeah. That could also be the case. You know.
but one thing that I thought, since we were talking about the letter and the history, you came across a letter the other day, or it was actually a poem that I read also, that was written by your mom's sister, Tia, and it was very powerful. She was very, I guess, creative. Would you say she was poetic?
Yeah.
Um, and so in that letter, it kind of shows, because we were saying that even though you think as a kid it doesn't affect you, it affects you. She was an adult writing this poem that, home for her was Cuba, right? And that she may never get, the ability to be
To
back,
return.
to return in life, but that maybe one day her ashes, her remains would be taken to Cuba. It was something along those lines.
Yeah,
right?
it was very sad.
It was very sad, very sad. However,
some people have that gift to be able to, with the word,
oh yeah,
they say, the pen is mightier than the sword.
yeah,
So some people have a gift to communicate
yeah,
to that level. I mean, it's
yeah, yeah. So yeah, no, that to me is just because it, some people made the promise that they would go. I know people from Mexico that have made this promise. People from Cuba, people from different countries, to go back to their homeland. They say, hey, one day I'm gonna go back, and unfortunately, let's say like grandma didn't go back, right? Grandma, grandpa, tia, they weren't able to go back. And so it's just interesting because I guess at one point you have to come to terms. I'm just thinking from my perspective, if I put myself in their shoes, at one point they have to say, it's not going to happen anymore. This is my new life.
right. Well, one of the things that my mom used to tell, you're right. One of the things that my mom used to tell me, and, are about the Cuban exiles in particular. They never lost the idea, the hope that they could return. Okay? But we couldn't. Not while the government, for the communist government, was on. That's Fidel Castro on. They were all waiting for him to pass, right? And he lived a very long life.
Yeah.
So, but that was the difference between us and all the other Latin America, or some of the, because, for example, geographically speaking, we're right next to Mexico. So the people that would come from Mexico were able to, at the slightest thing, go back to their homeland. And that was something that
it's a little easier.
It's easier.
Right? Not that it's easy. I'm sure there's challenges too.
Yeah, I mean, I'm paraphrasing, and of course, nothing is easy. Everybody goes through things. But there was somebody, as I was growing up, I think I was in high school, ending high school, and they critiqued the Cuban immigrants and said, look, even the hardship that you have, the curse that you have, that you can't go back because the government is still communist, is the blessing that has allowed you to excel. Because you can't go back. You got to make it here no matter what.
It's like the burn the ships.
Burn the ships. And I know that guy got criticized a lot by many people. And it was an interesting
Yeah, it is an
take,
interesting take.
because I remember that, and see, that stayed with me. I'm going back to high school.
Yeah.
Oof, 1978. That's the last year of my high school. And I remember that. And this guy said, it's the same curse that affects your immigration from your country. It's also the other side of that coin. It's a blessing because you guys know you can't go back.
Mm.
You've got no choice but to make. And the mentality is different there. You have no choice but to make it, and you will make it, because the criticism was that a lot of Cuban people are successful. I'm not trying to, in business or whatever. And there was a lot of stuff going on in Florida, because there were a lot of us in Florida, and a lot of us did very extremely well there.
Mm-hmm.
And they were comparing the immigration of different countries.
Right. Right.
And so, I don't know what to think of that. I would have to give it some thought.
Yeah.
Because I see people that are extremely successful from every country.
I agree. I agree.
Yeah.
I think one thing, just from, let's say, partially in the inside, I mean, I was not born in Cuba, right? But I of Cuban descent. I think one thing that, I guess, if we were to look at the Cuban people that came in exile to the United States, the history of Cuba is that it was colonized by the Spanish. Now, when the Spanish colonized Cuba, there was a lot of migration of Spaniards to Cuba for a better land and a better opportunity, just like it happened with Portugal and with France and with different countries, right? So I remember reading the story of the Bacardi family, Bacardi,
Uh-huh.
and they were immigrants. They came from Spain, and then they established themselves in Cuba, and then eventually they left, right, because of the revolution, and they had to go to Puerto Rico.
Yeah.
But before that, the Cuban people are immigrants. You have the original native Cubans, which were the
Indians.
Tainos and the different native Indian tribes, but you had they're immigrants. The people that are in Cuba, they were, and I know, and that was something that always was interesting to me, because I remember meeting Cubans that were Arab descent.
Yes.
Cubans that were, grandma always talks about Cubans that were Chinese descent.
A lot of Chinese in Cuba.
Spaniard descent,
Arabs.
Jewish descent.
There were a lot of Arabs. Arabs in Cuba.
Yeah.
There were a lot of Armenians in Cuba.
So interesting. Actually, we met an Armenian from Cuba.
Yeah.
We met him, and it was interesting because he didn't speak Spanish, which was
very little.
But he was very proud. Yeah, very little, but he was proud of being Cuban. He had a Cuban flag.
Yeah, on his computer.
On his computer, but he was Armenian.
Yeah, his name was.
And I think what happened there was maybe when the Armenian genocide was occurring, his family migrated to Cuba.
I think so. And there were quite a few, actually. Yeah. And there were actually a lot of Arabs in Cuba.
Yeah. So what I'm getting to is that the Cuban people they were people that were always like on the move, but they were people that a lot of them, I'm not talking about all of them, they came from the idea of create an opportunity in this new land. And that's what happened with the Bacardi family, is that I think Spain somehow was funding some of the, like they said, hey, there's this place called Cuba. We want to, it's a land where it's very rich, the soil, this and that. We want businesses to come here. We'll help fund you. I think that's how the story goes, that the government helped to fund
the migration. Check into it. It's very interesting. Yeah.
Into Cuba. Yeah. So.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Well, we want to say thank you to everybody.
Yeah.
And especially to this
all
gentleman.
Our viewers. Our valued viewers.
Oh my goodness.
And this was just cool feedback. It was unexpected. It's not why we're doing our podcast, but it was just a really cool thing. And I said, hey, let's just do a little response to the 8-page letter that we got from our friend.
Thank you. very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very
Thanks for
much.
watching, everybody. We'll see you on the next one.
All right.
Okay.